Good evening. I call to order the 9 January meeting of the Des Moines City Council Environment Committee. Our first item of business is approval of the minutes from December the 12th. Do I have a motion?
I move we approve the minutes from 12/12/2024.
Second.
Then the minutes are approved. That takes us to our next item, which is the 2025 work plan. Take it away, City of Des Moines.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good evening, council members. Tyler Beakley, Surface Water Manager. I'll be covering this item. So each year we like to look through the work plan for all future environment committees. And today we're presenting the draft 2025 work plan. As discussed before the meeting, I'm going to be moving fairly quickly so we have time for item 3, which is a larger presentation. So I'm going to jump into January where we have today's meeting. We have the 2025 work plan discussion and the Des Moines Creek Estuary presentation. Moving into February, we have the CIP project updates. This is looking at our surface water utility and all of our capital projects, whether in design or construction, and we present basically a status update, and you'll see that one throughout the year. Moving into March, we have our NPDES program overview, so that's a backwards look at what we accomplished the last year as part of our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit as for the city and meeting ecology requirements. Also, at that same meeting, we're going to present our 2025 SWIMP plan, Stormwater Management Program plan, and that covers a one-year look ahead at what we're going to be doing as part of our pollution NPDES permit. Moving into April, we have our WIRA 9 ILA update. WIRA 9 is our local regional watershed. We'll learn more about them tonight in the next item, but we're going through an ILA next iteration of the agreement, and that's where staff will present that ILA to committee and then full council for approval later. Moving into May, we have our operations and maintenance overview, so that gets a kind of zoomed in status update of what all our city crews are doing for our surface water utility, what maintenance projects are going on, and all those various programs that we're initiating this year and are already underway. Moving into June, another CIP project update. Going into July, we have our Stormfest program overview, which is that annual kids public education outreach event we hold for 6th graders at the beach park. We'll present how this year went in 2025. In August, we're going to have the Des Moines Creek Basin Committee status report. This is a new item adding this year to continually come back to the committee. We just got into that new ILA, and we want to present how it's going each year to the committee. We'll also present the draft SWIM CIP budget for 2026 through 2031, as we do each year. In September, we'll present the final 6-year CIP budget, as well as another CIP project update. October, we have our Poverty Bay Shellfish Protection District status. This is the bay down in Redondo, and talking about the ongoing shellfish harvesting restrictions down there and what's being done to bring those back into compliance. We have our source control program update. This year in 2025, we're doing that in-house, so we will let you know how that went. And that is just going out to businesses and helping them with pollution prevention practices. And then lastly, in December, we have another CIP project update for y'all. That concludes the month overview. I did get word from our planning director that she at some point will be adding a critical areas update to the agenda sometime in the year, but that's still to be determined. That concludes my staff notes on this item.
Colleagues, questions, comments?
Yes, I just have a question. Federway we've talked about drainage areas before and our responsibility to look at various creeks and stuff that come through. And we do have a jurisdictional overlap, that sort of thing. Federway has just announced that they are replacing the culverts on Redondo Creek up, and this is all the way up at near 216th and, or not 216th, 16th and Dash Point Road. And they're doing that, and they do admit that there are 5 other culverts between there and Puget Sound. One, of course, is the long one that goes down through Redondo. What they're planning for salmon restoration and but they're 5 culverts up from us. How does this work?
Yeah, that's honestly something I'm not familiar with. This is news to me of that project. They have not provided, at least our Public Works, with that notice yet. I believe it should be coming. Maybe you got an early scoop on that one.
It was in the Federal Way Mirror on, I think, the 14th.
Their report, okay. So, yeah, usually at the staff level, sometimes it trickles in a little slower, but there is a formal sort of outreach typical for projects. I can tell you, I'm not aware of any plans on the Des Moines side to address those culverts. Our latest culvert we addressed was on Barnes Creek. I think that's just very city to city and what initiatives and maybe what culverts are causing flooding issues beyond salmon. Maybe there's restrictions there that are frequently flooded. Just speculation on my end.
Okay.
Anything else? Take it away.
Hello, welcome to 2025. Thank you for being here today. I know we've talked a little bit about where am I trying to find it here? I think the update on the pollution remediation. No, that's not it. Sorry. It's the one where we go to businesses and do outreach.
Source control.
Thank you,
Yes.
source control. I found it and then
Yep.
lost it again. And I know we had talked about how the emphasis really was on businesses in the Marina District. And I'm hoping to hear if there'll be some plans to do outreach to businesses on Pacific Highway this year, or if it will remain focused downtown.
Yeah, I can answer that right now. I believe it's 10% we have highlighted in the Marina District, and the rest of them are throughout the city, with some I know on Pack Highway.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Anything else? Believe it or not, I really don't have anything other than I've sent a memo about we have had this thing called a land stewardship policy since forever, and I'm hoping that you can allocate a little bit of time to take a look at that. It goes back to 2012, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and time waits for no one. So let us, if there's nothing else, just please.
I know we had been waiting, thank you, Chair, to see the results of the November election about whether or not we would have the carbon tax preserved here in Washington State. And I know much of it goes towards green transportation, but is there any relationship or nexus of possible grants that we could go after, knowing that pot of funding will be maintained in this coming 2-year budget?
Not that I could answer off the top of my head.
Sure.
I'm sure there may be with some research coming. It's just something I haven't looked into yet. So something that definitely I could report back on.
Okay.
Anything else? Great. Then moving along to, the main event, item 3, Des Moines Creek Estuary presentation.
Great, thank you, Chair. Just introduce the staff who will be leading this one. Pleased to announce Alex, new to the city, newest engineer here. So I'm going to pass it his way. We're happy to have the help. So pass it over to you, Alex.
Welcome.
Mike here.
Hello, thank you, Council, for having us. As Tyler said, my name is Alex Johnson. I'm a new civil engineer and capital project manager for the Surface Water Group. To round out our presentation here, we have Parametrics, Nikki and Paul representing them, and we have our friend Matt with our funding partner, Raya 9. So to give you a little background on the Des Moines Creek Estuary Restoration Project, it's been to council a couple of different times through the grant award process and task assignments. So we are currently funded through about 30% design, and we would like to present some design alternatives to ask for your input and concurrence on. So with that, I will pass it to Matt to give us a bit of background.
We're better than that.
Okay. All right. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that introduction. My name's Matt Goring. I'm with Raya 9. Just as a little background for that, The Raya 9 staff services are cost shared from an ILA agreement that is split across the 17 local governments in the watershed. So Tyler had asked me just to provide a little context for salmon recovery as you consider the Des Moines Beach Park proposal. It's no surprise salmon are part of our cultural identity and fabric of the Pacific Northwest. In response to the kind of drastic declines in the 80s and 90s, the legislature passed the Salmon Recovery Act in 1998 to address declining salmon populations. At the center of this effort was locally supported watershed-based salmon recovery planning efforts. And so in response to this, the 17 local governments within the Green Duwamish and Central Puget Sound watershed, or Raya 9 as I'll call it from here on, entered into that ILA to support development and implementation of a salmon recovery plan. So fast forward to today, we're 25 years later. This salmon habitat plan serves as the blueprint for our investments in salmon recovery in the watershed. You know, if you look at the map, Raya 9 is a diverse watershed, about 575 square miles. For planning purposes, this is broken up into 5 sub-watersheds. You know, for the city of Des Moines, it's located within the marine nearshore subwatershed that spans from Seattle down to Federal Way. In total, the plan identified 39 habitat projects in the marine nearshore subwatershed. 3 of those are located within the city of Des Moines. And so, as Alex mentioned, in 2023, Raya 9 awarded the city a grant to explore the feasibility of integrating salmon recovery and salmon habitat in addition to flood risk reduction and recreational opportunity at Des Moines Beach Park. So why nearshore habitat? I think everyone knows this, but salmon are anadromous, right? They spend part of their life in freshwater, the other part in marine waters. And as this diagram attempts to show, each of the subwatershed plays a unique role in the life cycle of salmon. Just kind of think of it like a series of cogs in a wheel, right? You pull one out, you disrupt the whole life cycle. And so here in the marine nearshore area, we're really looking at supporting rearing and foraging habitat for juvenile fish, not the big salmon that, you know, we all love to catch. We're talking about the size of your finger when they come out of the river. These shorelines are productive areas. They support diverse prey items such as invertebrates, forage fish like herring, surf smelt, sand lance, as well as provide eelgrass and other areas that serve as shelter for juveniles. So, you know, again, no surprise, historical development patterns have profoundly impacted the shoreline across Puget Sound. Within Raya 9 alone, we have 92 linear miles of shoreline. About 2/3 of that is armored with seawalls, revetments, bulkheads to protect the shoreline. So, you know, what does hard armoring do? You know, it's intended to protect the shoreline, but at its fundamental value, it's disrupting sediment delivery and sediment transport. So what that can lead to is narrower, rockier beaches, fewer invertebrates, decline in forage fish spawning habitat, and even the loss of eelgrass beds. This cascading of impacts can ultimately reduce the prey availability for salmon and contributes to what I'm sure we've all read about in the decline of early marine survival in juvenile salmons. So as we look at the marine nearshore habitat projects in Raya 9, they're striving to restore some of this nearshore habitat, recognizing that, hey, this is high-priced real estate. It's going to be a balancing act between interests. And as you can imagine, after 20 years, 25 years of implementation, the low-hanging fruit in terms of habitat projects has already been built, right? So as we move forward, we're talking about more and more trade-offs, compromises between climate resilient, multi-benefit outcomes that benefit both fish and people. And so I just want to applaud Tyler and his team and the city for taking a real careful look at the opportunity to integrate critically needed salmon habitat into the waterfront.
My name is Paul Fent. I'm with Parametrics, and I'm the project manager for the estuary enhancement project on Des Moines Creek. So I'm going to go over a few things today, or our team is going to go through a few things. We're going to first talk about a little bit of background, just to give you a setting as far as when we use terms about places and so on, that you follow what we're doing. We'll talk a little bit about project goals. Every restoration project needs goals, and we've heard a little bit about the funding and so on, so there'll be a few comments on that. We'll talk about constraints. Every project in a built environment has some considerations and constraints to address. And then we'll get into some of the alternatives. And so, and we've broken the project into areas more for the ability just to be able to bite off and understand what we can chew, how much we can chew at one time. But ultimately, all the project pieces go together. So they're not considered separate projects. We're just having separate discussions about the projects. So to give you a little bit of a setting, we're going to be talking mainly about these 4 areas at some way or another, and really focusing on the number 1 area, which is what we call the bulkhead or the viewpoint area. A second part, since this is the Des Moines Creek Estuary Project, we'll be talking about the estuary. And the estuary is a moving area that's kind of in between the translation between when the fresh water from Des Moines Creek enters the salt water and so on. So it's not as an exact spot or a real spot, it's just an area in between those two, and a fairly complex mix of different types of habitats and plants and so on. Third part is Des Moines Creek itself, which is the freshwater part as it heads up the hill. And the fourth part is the meadow, which is the main park area. So we'll be talking at times about different pieces here. One of the main things that we do when we start a restoration project is we emphasize the word restore, and that is so we look and see, well, what was there before, what could be there, and that gives us a really good sense of an opportunity of what's potentially possible or what was there before. And so that's often a starting spot. In our case, of course, this is one of the earliest aerials that's available of the site. Of course, you can see Des Moines Creek on there, but it's that a lot of the development and the changes occurred well before this. So they've been there for a long time. And so there's not a lot of what we call analogs to follow as far as what was there before. It's something that we can go back to. So these are the project goals, and we're trying to connect the project goals and the project funding goals together. And so every time when we have a project, again, we set out with some objectives and so on. And without objectives, it's hard they give us direction as far as what we're looking for and trying to accomplish. So we've identified a number of goals relative to habitat, relative to flooding impacts, some desires and interests as far as the access to the shoreline and the use of the shoreline. And then there's other ideas and concepts about the connectivity of the area to the Des Moines Marina. And so these are put next to and in parallel with the the names and the words that were in the grant requests, and what the objectives, what the focus was of each of the different grants, and what the goals are there. And then you can, if you focus on the column on the left and then look at the project goals on the bottom, that's where the overlap occurs. So we have an obligation on the funding side to look at the project goals there, and we have our interests that are driving us as far as making decisions on the restoration proposals that we're looking at in our project goals. So we want to make sure we define and show how these fit together and that they're not separate things. So we mentioned early on that every project has some sort of constraints on it. And these, so we're going to talk a little bit here about physical constraints. And so, or what we might define as technical constraints too. So first we'll point out the steep slopes. So as you're aware of, if you've been to the park, of course, there's steep slopes on either side of the main ravine from which Des Moines Creek comes. Those are important because they can be limiting. It's difficult or expensive to develop there. They become threats to the project that you have to protect in order to make sure that they don't fall down on your project. They kind of become a boundary for us in this project. The next part is the big red loop that goes through here, and that's beach access. And this is part of an agreement that the city has with property owners that are up the beach to the north, and it's their only access to their houses. And so you have a written agreement to maintain an obligation to allow them to continue to move there. So that becomes a factor in the work and the alternatives that we're going to have. And then lastly you see lines scattered all over your plan. Those are existing utilities. So every time when we're digging in the ground, call 811. So whenever you're digging in the ground, those are things that would factor into any changes we make. So normally it would result in possibly moving utilities around and so on, which are typically additional costs and additional considerations when we're making design decisions on these restorations. So now we're going to start going. Nikki's going to start taking you through some of the alternatives that we're going to talk about.
Thanks, Paul. My name's Nikki Redden, and I'm a project engineer with Parametrics. So starting with our existing conditions for the meadow area, we do have a historic boundary on our site. A good portion of our project site is on the National Register of Historic Places. So we know any project work we do within this boundary will likely be restricted or require construction approval. And then a couple important points on our site. We do also have a pedestrian circulation path on the outer perimeter of the meadow. And this circulation path includes an overlook up on Des Moines Creek. And there is a pedestrian bridge that connects the meadow to the bulkhead area. And then we do also have that vehicular access point that Paul mentioned in the constraint slide. So now we'll take a look at, we know that flooding impacts is one of our main project goals. So we wanted to go ahead and take a look at existing floods that we've seen on the site and take a look at some future anticipated flood events based on sea level rise. We know that some more impactful events will be coming because of sea level rise. So two of our most recent events we have on here are the December 2022 king tide and the December 2024 high tide. You can see what that actually looked like on our project site. And we do have, it's a little bit hard to see here, but we have an outline of the elevation of those flood events and approximate elevation outlined in the black dashed line. So we wanted to go ahead and kind of correlate that to what we're expecting in the future. So we have our blue overlays on here that are flood events that we're expecting at different frequencies in the year 2100 while accounting for sea level rise. So first, starting with our darkest blue overlay, we're expecting a flood event to reach this elevation once a year, every year. And you can see that, and again, this is in the year 2100. And you can see that loosely correlates to what we saw on the site during the December 2022 king tide. Then moving to our medium blue overlay, we're expecting a flood event to reach or exceed this elevation once a month every other year. That's a little bit of tricky wording, but what that really means is every month you can flip a coin and that outcome will determine whether or not it meets or exceeds this elevation. And again, that sort of loosely correlates to what we saw on just a few weeks ago on the December 2024 tide. And then our last blue overlay we included on here, we wanted to show the most frequent flood event that we are expecting to impact our site in any sort of way. So we included this blue overlay, which will flood just past the pedestrian circulation path. And we're expecting to see that flood event once a month for 7 months of the year. With those flood events in mind, we're not expecting there to be much of a low or no action alternative on the site. If we're expecting the site to stay the exact same usability as it is right now. So we are expecting that the grassy lawn area may die off or transition to more salt tolerant plants, or at the very least require much more frequent maintenance. To remain the same grassy lawn that it is today. And we're also expecting some damage to the vehicular access point, to the pedestrian loop, or the pedestrian overlook due to frequent inundation.
Can I clarify something? So in this 2100 year, we're not talking about the damage of only being in December and winter months. We're talking about it could be any month could get to that 13-foot level.
Correct, yep.
And so at that point, the meadow could be unusable on a regular basis and move to more of a complete part of the estuary rather than just a lawn.
Exactly.
Okay. Wanted to make sure I got that right.
Yep. So, do you have anything to add there? Okay. So again, since we're not predicting much of a low or no action alternative, the city staff, our team at Parametrics, and our teaming partners wanted to strike a balance between maintaining as much of the existing park usability as possible and addressing these flooding impacts and all of our other project goals. So what we have here on the slide is our staff preferred alternative, which opens up the mouth of Des Moines Creek and creates some estuary intertidal marsh habitat. So this would include taking away some of the hard armoring around Des Moines Creek and along the beach line and adding back in a more natural shoreline, and then allowing some of the lawn to transition to an estuary habitat while still maintaining that beach access route. This would require moving the pedestrian circulation path a little bit and altering the bridge location. And we would still have to raise the green or lawn area up out of the flood elevation. Question?
Okay, approximately how far is the relocation of the bridge?
We have this is again just a very approximate location, but what we're showing here on the figure is at that pedestrian overlook point, that's where this bridge location is.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I believe you have in here, raised to 14 feet on the new meadow.
Mm-hmm.
What is it now? How much of an increase is that?
Yeah, it varies, but it's more like 12 feet now. And a lot of that, when we were showing those flood frequency intervals, that the highest one that we were seeing, the darkest blue overlay, that was 13 feet. So this is up out of that.
So the 14 feet you're talking about is a 14-foot tide?
Correct.
Okay. So how much of an increase, how much are you going to have to raise that up in order to meet the 14?
The range and thickness right now, that black line that you saw in the first picture is at around 13. So on the right end, you'd have to raise it about a foot. On the left end, it's around 11, 11.2, so you'd have to raise it about 3 feet. So it's kind of a wedge that you,
Okay.
but we're looking at the idea that it'd be about 14 feet, which there are still some extreme events in which it may flood and so on, but those would recover quickly. And so we're finding a balance between something that still fits in the landscape that's there and getting it above what the most frequent floods are going to be.
And I take it we would be raising the, I guess it's the north beach access road a similar amount.
Yes.
Okay.
The idea would be everything that you see as part of the built environment would be reasonably safe from the normal high flood tides.
Including the homes there?
No, just everything in the park. You mean the structures and buildings that are there?
The beach access route.
No. The beach access route, no, you wouldn't do anything with the access route. Just the built part of the road down to where they get down to the beach.
How long is the agreement between the city and the property owners that we have to maintain beach access? Is it in perpetuity?
I'd have to look to be sure, but
I believe so. We could double check that, but I believe it's in perpetuity.
And would the houses still be habitable if the water were to rise another foot?
I haven't looked into that at all, but it would certainly start, they would be challenged as well.
Just a respectful ask here. If we could hold questions to the end, I just want to make sure we get through all the material.
Thank you, but just
Yeah.
one, we're defined, this may be obvious, but riprap is hard armoring, correct? Okay,
Any added rock?
I just got it. Even though it looks, whatever, it's man-made in it, and it is up for grabs in this proposal. Thank you. Moving on.
So this alternative helps us meet all 5 of those project goals that we had by creating estuary habitat, creating shoreline habitat, addressing the flooding impacts on our site, still allowing for public access on our site and maintaining a connection point to the Des Moines Marina. So of course, the staff did review several other options, so we wanted to go ahead and show those, provide some more context on the other options that were considered before landing on this site, this alternative. So one of the options we considered was a larger estuary alternative, and this kind of matches the points that are already frequently flooding on the site. But ultimately decided not this option, partially because it does create new estuary habitat, it does address our flooding impacts, and meets the other two goals, but does not create any new shoreline habitat and reduces the amount of park area. Then we also considered a maximum estuary alternative where we would again be opening up the mouth of Des Moines Creek and creating a more natural shoreline. And still putting in a public access walking loop. But again, this meets most of our project goals, but doesn't have that connectivity point to the Des Moines Marina. Then we also considered widening the estuary mouth. This would maintain a lot of the park usability, but would require lengthening that pedestrian bridge and would create only minimal estuary or shoreline habitat. Then finally, we also considered simply elevating the lawn area up out of the flood zone. But again, this only meets a few of our project goals, and so the staff landed on this staff preferred alternative. So we do have a few other photos to help really illustrate this alternative. You can see on the right there a photo from the Nisqually Wildlife Refuge that kind of helps illustrate what really an intertidal marsh or estuary habitat area would. Thank you. A project analog to show, to again, further just help define what this site would really look like. So this is Carkeep Park Beach in Seattle. And you can see there, we have the built environment right there with the train tracks, and then we have the estuary directly next to that. And then a natural beach slope into the intertidal area. So that's something similar that we're thinking for this alternative. So that concludes our meadow area alternatives. Now we'll go into the bulkhead area alternatives. Again, starting with the existing conditions, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this bulkhead park, but the existing conditions are a lawn and pedestrian walking loop on the existing bulkhead. We do have some parking stalls and some other pedestrian features like benches, picnic tables, bike racks. And it's currently about 26,000 square feet of park area. There is one public access point to the beach from here. You can see the photo on the right. It's kind of a mix of a stair ramp access. And the existing condition of the bulkhead is we're seeing signs of failure like the concrete cracking, some asphalt cracking. One of the ramp access points has already been closed off. And we did actually see water from the 2024 tide up over the bulkhead, and that exacerbated some of these problems. We already are seeing an increase in the cracking from this one event. So again, with that in mind, we don't see too much of a low or no action alternative. Repairing or replacing the bulkhead in kind, we kind of expect to be a little bit of a permitting challenge, or we expect that it would require mitigation. So again, with that in mind, we came up with us as a team came up with the staff preferred alternative. Again, trying to balance the built environment and the natural environment while retaining as much park usability as possible. So in this alternative, we have about the same square footage in the park area and the backshore planting / riparian habitat planting as the existing bulkhead area. And then we'd have our natural beach slope from there. So we'd have a gravel beach like many other beaches you see around the Pacific Northwest, a potential sandy beach recreation area, and then we would have those backshore habitat plantings and some steps up to the actual upland park area. So again, like the meadow area, we did consider a few other options that I'll go through now just to give more context into how we landed on this alternative. We did consider a minimum upland retained alternative where we actually pulled back a lot of the the bulkhead wall. And this would require getting rid of the parking spaces that are there, but allows us to remove some of that revetment and pull back any of the elevation that's kind of above the mean high or high water level. And it would look similar texture-wise to the other alternative, a gravel beach, followed by some backshore riparian habitat plantings, and then the upland area. Then we did also consider in a maximum upland retain alternative. In this alternative, the green space and the pedestrian walking path have all the exact same square footage as the existing park, but with the added backshore habitat planting, all that transition zone that we need to get down to the beach, it actually adds a little bit more built environment past what the existing bulkhead influence is. So again, we're thinking same sort of gravel beach to transition zone to upland zone in this alternative. So again, back to our staff preferred alternative and providing a little bit more texture photos here. We're thinking the gravel beach could look a lot like what you see at Carkeek Beach, again, going back to that example. And our backshore habitat plantings looking something like what you see at Bowman Bay State Park. And we also have a project analog up in Seattle, in Pioneer Square, the Habitat Beach. And this provides a good example of, again, the built environment, and then building a habitat beach waterward of that built environment. And it has a lot of similar features to as what we're expecting on our beach site, like a rock revetment that is protecting the beach, a similar gravel beach slope into the intertidal area with some backshore habitat plantings. So we do have one last slide, and here's a rendering of our staff preferred alternative for the bulkhead specifically. And now we can take any questions.
Colleagues, take it away.
One additional note is we are bringing this to the full council later this evening as well. It'll be a very much reduced version of this presentation, but that's another opportunity for Q&A.
It looks like my colleagues are mulling for a second, so I have one quick thing and then I will check in again. Is there any money in this, or do we need more to develop some kind of 3D model for your preferred alternatives? I think the public will want to have a sense of the elevations, and you know, the aerial is fine, but it's just, this is a strategic thing, okay, that covers,
Well, this isn't a plant, but we
No,
can,
no, no,
we can go to show you what we have.
But if ever the council set aside 20 grand for this marina redevelopment thing, and I would move to, this is something that deserves a fly-through.
You all can expand on it, but it's underway. It's underway, and this is
Part of it,
You can-
Okay, I'm just
Yeah.
saying technically, that's
Yes,
like now
yep.
We
if
could show one today, right?
to do something.
Well, this is our
Yeah, just the
photo from it.
photograph, yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have to pull up the website, but
No, because I mean, people are just gonna basically everything from event planning to,
Yep.
and I'm envisioning like in Everett, you know, they have the Blue Heron Sanctuary, and it's just, but just wherever you have this marshland, I just think there are clusters of blue herons, and when I hear that, we have blue herons here, so I'm just thinking of it's really gonna eventually be something very different. So, okay, so, colleagues.
Yes, thank you. We, a number of years ago, raised up some of the historical buildings in the park. Given that we're going to be, potentially adding height to the meadow in order to get it up out of the flood zone and everything, are we sufficient in the heights we have now on the buildings, or are they going to have to be raised again?
Yeah, it's a little outside of our scope. of specifically what these grant funds are and what we're looking at, I can say, not all the buildings are at the correct current elevation, looking at the picnic shelter specifically. But that's something we would probably have to get back to you and see what information the city does have on that.
And then also, there are some buildings that you've shown them on some of the renderings here of, there are some historic buildings. The one is partially collapsed there and all of that, but I understand there are problems with the historic preservation as far as, what do we do in that case? I mean, wait for them to wash away on their own, or?
We're not actively working on that directly, but we are paying attention to that discussion. We sat in a few meetings specifically in regards to that meeting as it relates to our project. We're tracking it.
Okay, and approximately how many buildings are we in the zone?
It was that one building in particular.
I think there's 3 along the side over there.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you a number off the top of my head. I was just, the meeting we attended was one building specific focused.
Okay.
Yeah.
We kind of see it peeking out of the underbrush already. Thank you.
Councilmember Grace wants to read anything?
Thanks. I don't have anything in terms of questions, but looking at some of the design possibilities, I really am very much in favor of a reduced bulkhead that allows more walking access instead of just being an overlook and then a drop. And so those are very encouraging to see as some of the staff preferred alternatives, and really having the chance to increase the frontage space. And so it's not just a wall, right, when you come to that beach park. So I'm looking at that as part of my consideration, and I appreciate being shown multiple alternatives.
Thank you. So I'm gonna just, because of time, so yeah, my favorite tree is going away, okay. But how far upstream, I wanna get to the functional, to the salmon aspect of this, because that is a, that is a part of this. So how far up the creek? Because one of the functional obstructions to the salmon is there's this spot, this like transition to the trail that was always really like a real impediment to them getting to the next stage. So would this, is there a way to find out if this would apply to some sort of improvements in that area, and if not, I'm just saying I want to make it a sincere salmon thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's not, yeah.
Yeah, I can just answer that by saying, all projects come in phases, and this is looking specifically at the mouth of the creek.
Okay.
And the harbor, there. Another project would look upstream at other barriers in the future.
Okay.
But I personally think it's more logical to work up the creek, instead of fixing barriers.
Yeah. No,
While you're up and then working down.
I have to get it on the record that this, is a sincere goal. And so, but basically people now, is there any tension between people continuing to use the beach and so on and that salmon recovery? I mean, because people are splashing around all the time. Does that essentially end, or does it, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, so as Tyler mentioned, I think, you have to think about the goals of this project. When we talk about the estuary enhancement and the nearshore improvements, we're focusing on, as I mentioned, juvenile fish, right? Juvenile salmon habitat. So as we begin to look upstream at barriers, we're starting to look at adult fish. With respect to activities playing on the beach and stuff, I think, we see that at state parks all the time. There is continual use, I know that they don't harvest shellfish along this section, but, there's digging of clams out in Hood Canal and stuff, and that's all, you know, yeah, there are impacts, but it's generally compatible with salmon. So I would say that continued shoreline use, getting the kids out in the water, would be compatible.
Okay, that compatible was the word I was looking for, and the last word of the day is flooding. This sounds like it's mainly defending the estuary, and I am concerned about, like, there's like the little bridge thing that has to be, but this also, I'm gonna call it Don Wasson's, I guess it's the beach park now, the bulkhead thing. Can we predict the impacts on like the parking lot? And, because people will have concerns, who live in the area. Yeah, again, I think about that 3D thing. Should they have any concerns about, you know, anything to the south?
Yeah, I'll answer it then.
Can we predict that? I guess, can we predict that kind of a thing if we're making it more of this gentle, slopey deal?
It's always been in our mind to protect, you know, one of the alternatives showed no parking and remove those stalls. The staff preferred shows preserving the parking, and, you know, in the design, we want to make sure that access road to our own facilities, not only just the Normandy Park residents, is maintained and protected when the bulkhead is removed. Feel free to add any more if that covered it.
Well, I think that this picture is 3D rendering of what the recommended alternative is. And so we do have other parts, at least on the bulkhead area, where we've got these renderings.
Yeah.
And so on, until you'll notice that there is still a parking area in this option.
No, I'm just, my mind is
Yeah.
trying to will
Yeah.
the image over to the
Yeah,
right.
no,
But I just, you know, the word flooding will have two very different meanings depending on, you know, the two different audiences. And I guess that's, and I know you're mindful of it, I'm just putting it on the table because I am going to get emails about that. And just to be clear, this is not something new. I'm just talking about it now because it's something that will be like all of a sudden shocker to the community, even though it's been.
So you mentioned the public piece. I think that's a good thing to fill in. This is sort of, we spent the last year or so getting to this point with site assessment, surveys, coastal engineering. This council meeting, this environment committee is sort of the first launch of, here's the alternatives. We're seeking now feedback from council, committee, then community. That's what comes next in 2025 is a website, surveys, potentially open houses, to broaden that feedback from all the various stakeholders and park users.
And we didn't even get to the money part, which is really, to me, is going to be the fun discussion. But I'm assuming that is for another day, other than.
Well, we can answer it briefly for sure, is we have $500,000 secured currently in grant funding that we're using to get design. We can take where we're at today and get close to 30% design. So that's picking an alternative and advancing it through civil drawings. We're applying for a grant in the coming months to acquire funding, potentially to go to 100% design. We're still narrowing in what those numbers are, but potentially another $500,000 would do that. And that's our ask. Then final design, you know, you look at construction funding. And again, seeking grants. Currently, nothing is programmed from city dollars or surface water utility dollars. This is all being sought for grant support at this point.
How soon before we could have that magical 3D type drawing thing? I'd like my colleagues to have that before we make such a momentous.
We've got those done for the bulkhead area.
Yeah,
And the three options.
okay,
We don't have any for the estuary area.
okay.
And so that's something, and that's a little bit of, we wanted to roll out what the options were, get some feedback on them, because it's, you know, it takes effort to do that.
Sure.
And so to do 5 alternatives is, you know, really hard. To look at the preferred alternative, or maybe one alternative, or the bookends and so on, That's more straightforward. So we were we're hoping for feedback on saying we're leaning toward this, we like that, and so on, and then we would create the rendering on that preferred alternative. But we can clearly do the other ones, and just depending on the workload, and we would have to lay them out and design them. So Nikki and I would be drawing pictures and so on, and then we turn them over to the people. So I'm thinking kind of in the order of a month to 6 weeks.
So February 13th, we have the next Environment Committee, and we have a CIP project update where we could potentially shoot that for that as a target.
Okay, do we have the money and do you have the
Yes.
capacity to do what? Okay.
Yes.
Groovy, then I would love it if my colleagues are in agreement that we take a look at that February 13th. Everybody on board? Okay, then,
If I have a quick request.
please.
That would be.
And I don't mean to, if I'm asking too much, I'm
No,
really, I really
it's
wanna.
more that if there's some flavor in the direction which you're liking less or liking more, because that'll help us choose which angles to take on the rendering and which ones to develop.
I'm gonna ask for feedback. I think the preferred thing is, you are the subject matter experts. And, if you're going to put effort into it, I think that even if we ended up choosing something else, there would be enough additional information that it would be useful to the other 4 alternatives or whatever they are.
Okay,
Does that
yes.
make sense what I'm saying?
Yes.
I don't see any need for you to just be AutoCADing, for hours on each thing individually.
Okay, well,
And
we'll
there,
take the.
because, am I wrong, there does seem to be a shared interest in each of the approaches. It's just sort of a question of degree.
Right.
Am I,
Each of the alternatives accomplishes some of our goals, and the preferred alternative is the one that we think best accomplishes all of the goals as stated at the beginning of the presentation.
sweet. Any comments, colleagues?
I just have one question. Do we have any kind of a projected timeline on this?
Very, very rough and ballpark at this point. Final design, if everything fell in line, early 2028 probably is the most realistic. That would mean construction going into 2029, 2030.
What type of permits are we looking at?
Still to be done on the permitting, but I think you have a sense of maybe some,
It would be about as many different permits as you can possibly.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't mean to cut anybody off, but it looks like the next dinner service is getting ready to start, so we have to wrap it up. Unless there is anything else, I just want to express my gratitude. This is a lot, but there's a lot to be excited about. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, really. And so with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Very nice.